Hey, Good Show listeners, real quick, before this week's episode, we have two exciting pieces of information for you. One, Ted Lasso is coming back to Apple TV Plus for its third season on March 15th. Two, we want to pay for it.
Yes, you heard us correctly. We're doing a giveaway called Let Us Pay for Lasso. We're going to be giving away 2 iTunes gift cards that will pay for your Apple TV Plus subscription for the whole time season 3 of Ted Lasso is being released.
To enter this giveaway, visit our Instagram account at The Good Show Podcast. That's at The Good Show Podcast, and look for the Let Us Pay for Lasso post. All the details will be included in the post on how to enter.
We'll choose the winners Tuesday, March 14th at 10 a.m. and announce them as quickly as we can. We'll also notify the winners through direct message so you're all ready to start the next day. And now for this week's episode. Hello and welcome to Good Show, the podcast helping you answer one of the most daunting questions in television. What am I watching next? I'm Anthony Mako.
And I'm Brandon Sharp.
Our show this week is rather simple. It's about 4 single friends living in New York City. While all 4 main ensemble characters are quite prominent, the show is mainly focused around Jerry, a stand-up comedian. Across the hall lives Kramer, Jerry's zany neighbor who can hold down neither a job nor a relationship. One of Jerry's childhood best friends is still in the picture too. His name's George, and he tends to have some bad luck. But that's often just because he takes life far too seriously. And then we have Elaine, Jerry's former girlfriend, who is now just one of his best friends, who he may still be in love with, we're not sure. Of course, I'm talking about Seinfeld. And I had to just make up some other stuff to say because there isn't much else to say besides it's the best sitcom of all time.
Oh,
I know. Seinfeld was created by Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld, and it first aired on NBC in 1989. It ran for 9 seasons, and it can now be seen, or rather should be seen, on Netflix. Brandon, let's talk about nothing.
let's do it.
I guess if you don't know what I'm talking about when I say that, that's the common joke about Seinfeld, that it's a show about nothing.
And look at me, excited to talk about a sitcom.
Yes, here you are. Well, we'll get into this later, but if it's the best one of all time, I assume you're a little more tolerant.
If I can't hitch up my knickers for the best sitcom of all time, what am I doing talking?
What are we doing here?
Yeah. Podcast about television. I have no business.
All right, before we get into our stuff, I was thinking about how this is a very interesting thing because I think I'm actually sort of on the tail end. You and I represent this line of between Seinfeld fans because I was right on the sweet spot of watching Seinfeld when it was on.
Okay.
And then potentially, I'm sure it was by the time you were like old enough to watch it, it was already off, but then it's also in the in-between time where we weren't streaming yet, so you would have had to buy some DVD. You know, it's just it's an interesting thing, and we're right on the line.
Yes.
I think it's also possible that there's a fair amount of our audience that never even tried, doesn't know to try, at least some of the audience. And then there's going to be some of our audience that's just like, oh yeah, we know everything about the show. Why are you talking about it? So it's a really interesting case here.
I think one thing that's funny is we always act like you're 10 years older than me.
Do we?
A little bit. There's been a couple times that I've noticed that. Like,
well, I actually didn't mean that there. I was pointing to how strong that line is, even within only a couple year difference.
Okay, well then, yes. Yeah, that's absolutely
where
right.
I was probably watching it when I was a little young to be watching it potentially. Like I didn't get all the jokes yet. There's a whole lot of like sexual innuendo in Seinfeld that I probably didn't totally understand yet. Yep. And then I would, okay, so when it aired, I certainly didn't watch it when it aired, but then it was on for 9 seasons. So I hopped on there. When it aired, I was like 7 or 8 or something like that. So not old enough to have any idea what was going on, but still, I mean, and then it became a staple the older I got. And I'm just saying that I picked it up and was watching it regularly on Thursday nights when it watched the finale live, stuff like that. And I watched the finale live, and it was very important to me to watch the finale live because I was such a big Seinfeld fan. And then I think you're just that much behind where you never grabbed the momentum and would watch it.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
Then like I said, we roll into it didn't stream. You had to already be a fan. You had to buy the box sets because you were a fan, and you wouldn't do that unless, it's interesting series to talk about for sure.
Well, one thing I do remember, I have very strong memories of. You have the box sets, correct?
I did. Yeah, I don't have any DVDs anymore, but yeah, I did have them.
Okay, so the first time I really ever watched Seinfeld was in the green room at our old church. You had some of your box sets back there, and we had a TV. Yeah, this wasn't during church or anything, but
probably was actually, and that's fine.
I think it was on like a rehearsal night, and we had some Seinfeld on. Yeah, and that was probably the first time I had really ever watched it. I want to say Netflix was maybe picking up steam. That's a guess, though. And
I don't think so. Not yet. Not the streaming part of it yet.
Maybe not. But then I remember
DVD mailers was.
I remember seeing some of this in syndication. So it was definitely somewhere. I don't know why TBS is coming to mind, but maybe not that. It was definitely reruns were playing somewhere. And that's where I did a good chunk of watching, just a smattering of episodes in whichever order.
Which, that's fine. You don't really need to be in order. So.
Yeah, absolutely. This is perfect for that. A casual watch. And then, I've watched probably the bulk of my Seinfeld watching since it's been on Netflix.
Just for nostalgia's sake, that was also what I remember being hot in that time was either DVDs from the library or getting the Netflix DVDs mailed to you.
And then ripping them?
And then ripping them, yeah.
Also, Pirate Bay was pretty big.
It was, but it was certainly easier to not. We all were afraid the FBI was going to bust in the door at any moment. So it was easier to just borrow the DVD for a day and then somebody would build up a library and share that library,
Yep.
Yeah. So that was hot. Okay. So like I said, my origin story was that it was a staple in my house, and we watched it on Thursday nights. Once I was old enough to actually watch it, and I don't remember when I actually picked that up, but I think so. If I was 7, I was roughly maybe 16 when it was ending, something like that. Mm-hmm. And I do specifically remember. So in the 15, 16, you're getting old enough to like have your own taste, and so Seinfeld was my thing. Like that. It was very much my taste, but it didn't really start that way. I certainly credit my parents for getting me started on some funny stuff.
Yeah.
I guess you shared your origin story.
Yeah, a little bit.
Did you pick the rest up ever? Did you come in and say like, I'm going to watch the rest now? Cause I basically watched it all live. So
yeah,
were you intrigued enough to come back?
Absolutely. And this is something that's always been in the zeitgeist, even now.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Like it's just always been, like I've always had a recollection of Seinfeld. It was either, ads for Seinfeld were running before or after shows. I was like, it was just always around. I was always aware of it. Yeah. And it's something I always knew I wanted to watch at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, like I just go through my different phases, and it just finally made sense at, more recently to work my way through it. But
yeah, so at this point you've watched a lot, but you have not actually completed the whole thing.
Yeah. Full disclosure, right? I have not watched beginning to end of this.
Which I don't think is a problem at all. That you've watched enough, but what I think is this is one of the easiest shows to do that with, because you have no reference for where you are. Like there's nothing to check off story-wise. Right. There's nothing like how do you know what gap you've missed? You're just kind of like in limbo, bouncing around in Seinfeld world, where you could pick up almost, obviously the quality changes over the years, but you could pick up almost at any point and it wouldn't really matter.
Yeah.
So this is an easy show to just be like, oh, I never watched any of those episodes because I just didn't even know I didn't.
Yeah. and I remember one of my big questions was, is there anything like monumental, like Rob Lowe showing up on Parks and Rec, anything like that happens that I would at least want to punch through and make sure I saw, XYZ. And you're like, no, there is nothing earth shattering that happens halfway through the show. It's pretty much, it's pretty steady all the way through, pretty consistent. So
there are certainly like, in a Rob Lowe way, there are certainly characters that come in that are some people may like better than others. I'm thinking, and like come to the top of my head, Putty. When Putty comes in, Putty dates Elaine
Patrick
for
Warburton,
a while.
Yeah,
that's a really good thing that happens. Peterman is awesome. Like when Elaine works for Peterman, that's a really good series. But there's not really a bad time, because if Elaine's not working for Peterman, then George is working for Steinbrenner, like for the Yankees. And it's like somebody's got something really good going on. So it's not like, oh, the Peterman time is the best time because something else is going on for someone else somewhere else. So,
yeah. Yeah. And you say those, and I may not have seen like all the Patrick Warburton episodes, but like I know who Putty is. I know who Peterman is, so like I feel like I have a really good grasp on the show. So I'm excited to talk about it today.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so this is maybe the worst looking show of all time. Like, and what I mean by that is like, it looks like Jerry's apartment looks like it was made in a high school gymnasium. It's pretty bad. But
I've seen worse.
Okay,
but this is up there. I mean, it's really. I think one of the things that sticks with me now. I watched that riding in comedians in cars getting coffee, and I think on the Larry David episode, they went back to the Seinfeld set, like the street set.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, okay. Not the apartment set, but like the street, and that it looked like Sesame Street. Like it looked. I was like, oh man, this is. I just would have had no idea until you see it, and I'm like, yeah, that's it, and it doesn't look great. It looks way different when they were kind of like walking around. I don't know. That's when it really hit me. Like this was a very, very sound stagey show.
For sure. Yeah, it is. It's number one. It's the number one on our list. It's the lowest quality level sort of, but I do want to say, like, I don't feel like that matters. Like that's not what the show is about. It could almost be like a play because it's so funny. The
quality lies in other areas.
Yes. Yeah. That's a good way to put it. Yeah, well said. I do also think, but if you go back and watch the pilot, I don't know when the last time you watched the pilot was, but it was something that I did as I was sort of refreshing. It is horrible. Really, really bad. Jerry's apartment looks terrible. And even like Jerry's couch throughout the years, it looks like a garbage bags full of batting, and like stacked on like frames. It's like very weird. And also like just things like Jerry's dad is a different person. And they never really addressed that. Like it's just like, it doesn't matter. Who cares?
I feel like Jerry was always throwing around like a fair amount of money, not throwing around, but he always had money.
Yeah.
And he couldn't get himself a couch, like that.
Well, it's an interesting.
I don't know. That is, I bumped on.
That comes up sometimes early on. There's one episode early on, not early on, but I think maybe even in season 1 where George is at that point a real estate agent or something to do with real estate. And he's trying to get rid of an apartment and Jerry's like,
fireplace.
That. And they're just like, oh, you could just double your rent right now. And he's like, yeah, no problem. Like you're right about that. And then he could leave his crappy couch with Elaine, but he makes her pay him $50 just sort of out of principle. It's just none of it ever makes any sense, but it's fine. Okay. So, yes, let's move on to probably just the main thing to do with this show, which is characters.
Yeah.
And I think we have to sort of split this into a couple different sections. The first section is obviously the main 4. We got George, Jerry, Kramer, and Elaine. That's the main 4 characters. I think I don't even know how to jump into this. That is what the show is. 9 seasons of exploring these characters and the intricacies of them. And so I almost don't know where to start except to say, here's an interesting question. I don't know why I put it later in my rundown here, but it's just coming up in my head naturally. Okay. Jason Alexander is in my opinion, a phenomenal actor. Michael Richards is maybe the best like physical comedian. Yeah. Physical comedian all time. And obviously Elaine, I don't know why I'm blanking on her name right off the top of my head.
Dreyfus.
Yep. And she is a well-respected actor as well. And then you have Jerry Seinfeld, who, to be honest, is god awful at acting, in my opinion. He's terrible. I don't
know if I agree with that.
Okay. All right.
I mean, he's definitely not an actor. You know, it's funny. There were times in my life.
He's always grinning he's not supposed to be laughing, but he's always laughing.
There were times in my life when I'm like, what has Jerry Seinfeld done? And of course the answer is he did Seinfeld. You know, that was enough.
Sure.
But I think I spent time thinking about like, why is he such a big deal? What has he done? And that's the only like acting he's ever done was his time on Seinfeld. And
what's really interesting about him is he is a comedian. He is a comedian's comedian. He's got I don't know if you've ever watched
yes, he's a stand-up. And that's the way I feel like he approached that role.
Yeah.
Like he was walking around on stage.
Yep.
Little joke here, little joke there, a little observation.
Totally.
He's not going to win any Actors Guild Awards, but like, it's going to be funny. And in many ways, he's a smart guy. He set this up perfectly. He surrounded himself with 3 knockout actors.
Of course. Yes. Yeah.
And then he can just kind of sit there and tell the jokes and make the observations and crack smiles and grin and smirk.
Yeah.
I mean, genius, right?
Yeah. Do you feel like that was that intentional? Like, did he know he was bad? And when
I
say bad,
I don't know that he knows he was bad. I don't think he ever, I think he's just playing himself, like just strolling around, you know, with these crazy friends of his. But I think he was like, I do think that had to be a little intentional. Let's load the cast. Let's get 3 bangers. And then I can just kind of write. I can do a lot of the writing. I don't know. That makes perfect sense to me. If someone told me that, I would say absolutely, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I have high regard for Jerry Seinfeld. So when I make those jokes, I just think it's what I find so astounding about it is that he gets away with this.
Yeah.
And it still totally works.
Oh,
he's laughing. You see him smiling at something he shouldn't be smiling at. And it's a little bit like the early version of Saturday Night Live where people crack up during a skit. It's like where it like on Saturday Night Live, it got out of hand to where now people like almost like laugh on purpose during the skits.
The Jimmy Fallon era.
Well, but if we go back to something like Jimmy Fallon, where, I mean, obviously if Will Ferrell is,
it wasn't as acceptable back then. So that's a good point to bring. Yes.
Right. It would have been, but I think that made it more funny to us because we knew he wasn't supposed to be doing that.
Yes.
And now it's almost like, well, they expect to be doing this.
Right.
But when they couldn't hold it together in those early years, it's like Seinfeld feels like it's one step removed from that. It's almost that. Yeah. But somehow it still works. It's like a theater thing going on that you're watching. Oh. And of course, like you said, and I just think some of like Michael Richards' physical comedy, how could you not?
Well, like the thing with that is I watched some bloopers and I think when like he comes flying in the room and he like does a backflip over the couch or something, and then Jerry starts laughing, he goes, "Oh, come on. I can't do that again." You know, like it's always like, I'm really killing myself. You got to keep it together, you know? So I find that kind of stuff like the standard that comics hold themselves to and hold everyone else, like hold the cast to, like you've got to have ice water in your veins when this stuff's going on.
Oh yeah. Because
it's going to get, I can't keep doing backflips over this couch, you know? Yeah. So I don't know. I love watching the blooper stuff. It's I don't know, really telling of kind of everyone's relationship.
By the way, if you, just for the audience out there, if you have not recently seen the clip that's kind of popping around the internet right now, but the clip where Kramer he's trying to out this guy as being an addict, like this other guy they think he's a cocaine addict. And so Kramer's trying to like catch him. So he goes into the club with him and he's like trying to buddy up to him like, oh, let's party here. And he's smoking a cigarette and it's in the corner of his mouth. And at the same time, while he's smoking the cigarette, he chugs an entire beer. It's insane. It's the full clip. That's not fake. He smokes a cigarette while chugging a beer.
Does he?
It's insane.
He drinks and then he blows the smoke out.
And he burps the smoke out after he's done. It's unbelievable.
Well, and anything with Kramer, that's the funniest stuff to watch.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, for sure.
Just solid gold. Solid gold.
And if you've never seen it, you have to go watch it. Okay, so those four, we could go on forever about those four. I need to dab my eyes a little bit. Yeah, those four are unbelievable. Okay, do you have one you resonate with more than another out of those four?
Before we go on, are we going to break down the characters a little more later?
No, we can whenever you want.
Well, I don't want to do it.
You mean like their relationship with each other,
or their kind of character traits? I see you have it a couple places.
Cares?
I didn't want to
hit it now. We're here.
Okay, so I kind of like approached each character with a little bit of, just trying to observe each character and just things that would like pop off the top of my head. And I think what I found most interesting is, so George, one of the things that defines him the most is his outrage. Mm-hmm. Everything, he's outraged about everything. And when I kind of identified someone's character trait, there's also someone else in the group that shares that trait.
Interesting. Okay.
So like Elaine, a lot of times shares the outrage trait.
That's an interesting point to bring up because George's outrage is nerdy.
Yeah.
And gets him in trouble. And Elaine's outrage is like awesome.
Yeah.
Like she's usually the strongest person in the room. People are afraid of her. And George is just like where you would just be like, ha ha ha.
Yeah.
Like he's mad.
So anyway, I think what fascinated me was the Venn diagram and kind of like where they overlap, what makes them different, and how they fit together.
Okay, so let me go back to this question though. Do you have a favorite? And all I mean by favorite is there one you sort of resonate with more than another? Or I'll start. Mine is Kramer. And it's not because I think I'm the most like Kramer or anything like that, although sometimes I feel big and goofy. Yeah. And I use a lot of hand gestures, as you can see on now that we're on camera. Yep. You can see all my hand gestures that goes high up and a lot of that. But I also think I just obviously find him the funniest, and that doesn't mean he is the funniest. It's kind of like a subjective thing because I sort of resonate with him, but also he's just my guy.
Yeah.
Do you have one that you resonate with or you find the funniest or something like that?
I mean, I think my favorite character is Jerry, but I'm definitely not a Jerry. Brandon untethered. Brandon like in his, I don't know, prime was it George? Just like real like stuff bugs me and I'll get outraged and I'll hold a grudge. I mean, like that's me. Unfortunately, I hope I'm not like that anymore. But I know
there's nothing wrong with George.
There's some stuff wrong with George.
Well, there's stuff wrong with every one of them. So that's
I watching, in some of everything bothers him, and he just he just really, really gets worked up very quickly. And I was like, man, hopefully I don't do that anymore. And I don't know, it just really hit me sideways. Like as much as I'd love to say I'm like the guy sitting there cracking jokes and, nothing really affects him.
Yeah. Right.
He's laissez-faire, I'm more of a George in my heart of hearts. So
it's all right, man. You're good.
But but like the person who makes me laugh the most is Kramer for sure.
Of course. Yeah.
It's hard for me to every time. I mean, just whenever he's in the room in a scene, he's making me laugh for some reason. So I think Kramer's probably the funniest. Jerry's probably my favorite. But I probably got a little George in me.
Yeah. I think it's also worth mentioning, I think for me that it's, I think probably I couldn't reflect on it till now looking back, but I probably have discounted how much Elaine had to do with like, I don't even know how to describe that, but sort of my love interests in life. Like I probably had a pretty big crush on Elaine, but also
You've said this a couple times about a couple different television characters now.
Yeah. Well, just Winnie and Elaine, right?
A couple is two. So
sure.
two.
I just didn't know. I was just trying to remember if there was more than that.
I know. I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So but yeah, Elaine was a big deal. But I like the strength. I like Elaine's strength, and she wasn't putting up with anybody's crap, you know. And so I always like that a lot too.
I get that too. She's also flaky, a little flaky.
Yeah, say more. How so?
Well, I want to see if this resonates at all. Do you feel like she's the least developed of the characters?
I definitely think it's a situation. It could be a situation where it was like more dudes in the writer's room than so they're like, what do women? Because birth control and periods and stuff. That's what we're going to have Elaine. Yeah. So
I'm sitting here writing down character traits for all the characters, and Kramer, George, Jerry, just the pen's flying. Like I've got so much stuff, and Elaine's like, well, she's dependable, she's strong, but she's a little flaky. And then I was like, kind of fizzled out after that. Now I didn't know if it was a thing where, gosh, if I needed to like watch if I really spent time watching the whole thing, start to finish, if I would have a clearer picture, like maybe they learned how to write for Elaine a little later, you know, and I got a better, like a stronger sense of what she was about later on in the show.
I think to some extent, yes, but I also think that you bring up a fair point. And it's just hard to say. I don't think you would say Kramer is very developed. He's got a couple.
I think that's true, but man, for some reason, it was just, I could list 14 things that I felt like Kramer was, you know?
Yeah.
But yes, he is probably underdeveloped also.
Nah, I think Elaine's got some good stuff, but I do think that I think in her, like there's some good stuff about her relationships with female friends and different things like that. There's some interesting points throughout the series.
Okay.
I do think it's a fair point though, that she probably is a bit underdeveloped. And I also think probably, I would imagine maybe she developed over the course of the series the most because she started as a former, I mean, if you go back to early seasons.
Yes. Yeah.
She was basically just Jerry's ex-girlfriend and totally underdeveloped.
Yeah.
And then she kind of grows into it. And I always thought that was kind of admirable where they ended up taking it. I bet it's not where they planned on taking it in the first place, but where they ended up taking it, where they became friends and did not have to be romantically involved. Although the cat and mouse game of are they in love with each other? It's a little annoying and also a little awesome. So it's a little bit of both. Okay, so there's tons of secondary characters, even though this is mainly about these four characters. There's tons of secondary characters. Do any stand out to you?
I mean, Jerry Stiller.
Yeah.
Frank, right? Frank Costanza.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the funniest thing about him is he shares George's outrage. You know, I mean,
well, I mean, it's perfect in a
gosh.
In a comic way, it's perfect to say, you act exactly like your dad. It's not hard to figure you out.
Jerry Stiller's so good too. I mean, so anyway, he's my favorite of the.
He was so good for sure.
Yeah.
Newman always kind of annoyed me, but Jerry's reaction to Newman, it's just
good stuff.
It's perfect stuff. And I always like Putty was huge for me. I loved Putty.
He's a great character. Plus I've always enjoyed Warburton. I think he's a good actor.
Great. He's funny. Very funny. Yeah. Dry. Also, I always liked Peterman, kind of a aloof, rich, J. Crew kind of guy.
He's got that pompous voice.
Yeah.
He's a great character. And I do remember him a lot from like some of my rerun watching. I think I saw a lot more episodes with Peterman in it. He's really good also.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So then the next thing I want to talk about was when you have, it's obviously Seinfeld and West Wing are nothing alike, but to compare them in one way, when you talk about West Wing, you would talk about like, hey, a ton of people have made their first appearance in West Wing and you had no idea. Nick Offerman, etc., and go on from there. What's interesting about Seinfeld is Nick Offerman was in West Wing, and he didn't do anything in West Wing that like got him Parks and Rec.
Right.
Bryan Cranston is in Seinfeld, obviously, and there's a couple examples of that. Jennifer Coolidge is in Seinfeld. That's one, since we just did our White Lotus episode a couple weeks ago. But unlike West Wing, I think Seinfeld made some of these people. And so there's not big guest stars in it. But anybody who came from Seinfeld, like Seinfeld was kind of their thing in the first place. Obviously, Bryan Cranston got entrusted with stuff later, but you come in, you do your job on Seinfeld, and that's somewhat a little bit one of the things you're known for, I think.
Yeah. And looking at this cast list, tons of people I recognize.
Sure.
But whereas like Friends, I know Will and Grace, they would have big stars come in and do guest appearances.
Yeah.
There's no one like that in this cast. There's no one that really just pops off the page.
Yeah, not at all. Yeah.
In any of these guest stars, but lots of solid actors who went on to do, I think what I'm seeing is a lot more like television actors.
Yeah.
And comedians. I think that makes perfect sense too. Jerry was probably using more comedians in some of those guest appearances.
Yeah, and I'm sort of thinking through people like for example, Babu, the owner of the restaurant across the street. Jerry gets him deported. Kramer has a friend, Mike, who gets in a couple fights with Jerry. And like, there's just so many people you have no idea who they are besides Seinfeld. But if you said like Babu, you might remember that. Or but there's like, I don't even know, 100 of those for Seinfeld. It's crazy. Like they have their own little piece of the Seinfeld universe, and you remember them. It's just pretty cool that they carve that out for people. One more interesting thing, sort of in that vein, is I just found it very interesting today when I was looking. Jerry is in 172 episodes of the show. Elaine and George are in 171 episodes of the show. Kramer's in 170 episodes of the show. The next highest star of the show in the most episodes is someone named Ruth Cohen, who is in 101 episodes of Seinfeld. She is the cashier at the diner. She hardly ever said anything, but she's in 101. She's credited with 101 episodes of Seinfeld, which is cool. And the next one after that is Newman at 44, half the amount of Ruth Cohen, the cashier at the diner.
I think that's really a testament, though, to how much they built this show around the main characters. I mean, it's about the four friends.
Yep.
There just wasn't a lot of room for anyone else, I mean, I see that and it does sound funny, but it makes perfect sense to me. I mean, they really just fill the episodes.
Okay. Now, this is a sitcom. It doesn't have a whole lot. I'm going to mix story and writing together. And I'm just going to say this show is about nothing, sort of. But how were they able to do that? Like, it's still... First of all, like I said, you can hop in at any point and it doesn't really matter. It matters almost less than any other show, this through narrative. It's not any enduring themes that go through Seinfeld are not necessarily purposeful, and you kind of like they're not playing on them. It's just like, here's a new skit this week in the Seinfeld universe. How did they make that work? Like for so long, for 9 seasons, how did they make people care about this story? Do you have any idea?
I mean, it's a testament to a lot of the things we've been talking about because, and I know I referenced this a little bit in some of my later notes, but it's really the genius of the writing. Yeah. You're basically at that point, you're writing however many, you're writing weekly stand-up routines.
Yeah.
You're writing just different sketches. These are little plays. And I think they just had, Larry David and Jerry, like, I think they were just a couple of geniuses.
Yeah.
And they had an all-star cast. The fact that the story is always so light, really, you have to rely on the writing at that point.
Yeah.
Like specifically the dialogue.
The
dialogue has to sail,
But they were also really good at tying like A story and B story and C story together and having these things that are not interrelated at all, but then in the end they come together, and then there's the final, blow, and then they move on, and that's it. That's what this episode was about. And it was sort of about one thing, but it was about three things that came together as one thing, and they were just really, really good at that. But then it didn't matter after that point. It was just we're on to something new next week. At the same time, it seemed like based on watching like Curb Your Enthusiasm and stuff like that, it seems like Larry David would get annoyed at something about during the week, and then he would come in and whine about it, and Jerry would get worked up and whine about it too, and they'd be like, "Oh, that's an episode right there." It's just like that easy.
For sure. And I mean, Jerry's stand up at the beginning and end of each episode, that's what the episode's going to be about. Get ready for that.
Sure. Yeah.
It was absolutely something to that effect. Something,
and then the brilliance of them sort of like turning that around, and basically being like
adapting it for TV. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's brilliant for sure. All right, Brandon, the most obvious question I think as would probably be, does this show stand the test of time? / does this show hold up? You watch it? Do we watch it now? I don't even know if I can answer this. I'm so nostalgic about it. But if you go back to this show now, does it hold up?
Yeah, I feel like Seinfeld will go down as maybe the archetype of the perfect sitcom.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a formula that's been attempted multiple times to varying degrees of success,
mm-hmm.
And in some ways it was really just like lightning in a bottle. And I said before, I really feel like it's just a testament to Larry David and to Jerry Seinfeld.
Yeah.
Why it worked so well once and not, there's been other versions, and it's just, nothing has worked quite like this.
Yep. Yeah, that's quite true. I mean, I think it mostly because it doesn't deal, it sort of seems like it's dealing with contemporary issues, but it's actually not. It's dealing with incredibly lighthearted and enduring issues.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of something you might joke about that these sorts of people always do this. It's that's the kind of joke they're making,
mm-hmm.
but in a very light way, not in a, I don't know, whatever would be a contemporary issue kind of way.
Yeah.
There's nothing that's dating it to a certain time period besides their clothing or something like that. But
there's one scene where Jerry's at a party, and this lady goes, "Oh, you're the stand-up comedian. Don't you make the observations?" And, you'd comment on what people you run into over the course of your week. And he's like, "Yeah." And she's like, "Oh, I've seen your show," and kind of moves on. You're not that funny.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I love how self-deprecating he can be also.
Oh, sure.
And just very meta, just takes the, just a very good perception of who he is as a person,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think all of that works really well.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay. There's 4 distinct personalities in this show,
Mm-hmm.
but they're very different. In my opinion, it's almost unbelievable that they would be friends at all. So why does this work so well as their relationships together? Even George and Jerry, it's okay, I buy the explanation that you were friends since whatever young age it was. I think, they definitely went to high school together. I'm not sure what age they met before that, but they definitely went to high school together. So, but they're nothing alike. And honestly, it would seem like one would drive the other so insane that they couldn't be friends anymore. And then it's they actually make jokes about how Elaine and George couldn't possibly get along together if it weren't for Jerry gluing them together. So now,
first of all, I don't think it would work in real life, period.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's no way. There's no way you could be great friends with someone you dated. One.
Yeah.
There's no way you could live next to someone like Kramer,
a full freeloader who breaks into your house
without killing
steals
him.
all your stuff. Yeah.
So 1 + 1 plus George. There's no way you could be around someone who complains as much as he does.
Yeah.
So all of those things at the same exact time. But I think what works, like what makes it work here, we get to see all of this unfold because Jerry is this fake person. You know, he just, that person doesn't, someone who's patient enough to have three people like that in their life at the same time doesn't exist, you know? Yeah. And I think the fact that he is in this show allows us to see just the craziness that happens then. So,
yeah. And also I think in some weird way, the show's sort of about how cool Jerry is, how laid back Jerry is. He just puts up with whatever. It doesn't really
That's a shame.
Yeah.
You know, like that's absolutely true. And that's why, like, I admire that, man, just unflappable, just anything. And he'll make a comment or smirk. But
also he does appear to be pretty much like that in real life as well. So,
although you can tell he is super OCD and,
it is an interesting combination.
Stuff bothers him. You can tell.
Yeah. It's interesting though. Yeah. Is that how he talks? I mean, this isn't about the show, but is that the facade he puts up, or is it, cause he's also like very sort of zen about like death and, you know, stuff like that. It's just like, whatever. When it happens, it happens. You know, it's just not a big deal to him.
Oh, well,
and at the same time, he seems like almost Howie Mandel washing his hands all the time type. Yeah.
I think I mean more like neurotic, less OCD. Like he's a little bit like of a spaz. And I feel hopefully that's not derogatory, but I feel like so he'll have like fake, I feel like he'll placate George a lot. Fake outrage with George. Yeah. Like, yeah, you're right. That is really irritating. Whatever it is, you know, he's really irritated too.
Yeah.
But then I don't feel like he always really cares about what
there's also a ton of times where George is sharing some harebrained scheme with him and he's like, yeah, that could work. He's not like shooting him down directly.
Yeah. He's just a really good friend. I think you're absolutely right.
That is true. He is a good friend.
He makes it all work. But at the end of the day, he gets another comedy routine out of it. You know,
that's right. Yeah.
Whatever crazy thing his friends did, he gets another set. So.
Well, we're honestly, I didn't know that we were going to go on this long. We've kind of been going on about it, which is great. I just didn't know we were going to.
There's a lot of coughing in the middle there, though. So
I don't think there's like 20 minutes of coughing. So
it felt like 20 minutes.
So we're not like a nostalgia show. So like we could probably go on with favorite moments forever, but I'm not sure we need to go through all that. Like, what's your favorite moment, or just like, ha, remember this, ha, remember that. So let me ask you a broad question to say, with so many shows available now, why should someone go back and watch this?
Oh, you're not going to favorite me? I didn't realize.
Oh, you want it? Do you want a favorites?
Well, I got some stuff. I mean,
okay. What's your favorite Jerry girlfriend?
Okay. So always had a little bit of a crush on Terry Hatcher.
Oh, sure.
So she was probably my favorite. Unless I can say Elaine, because I love Elaine. If you can't say her, I would say Terry Hatcher. I don't remember her name though in the show, but
I don't remember her name of the show either.
I always had a little bit of a crush on her from her Lois and Clark days.
Superman.
Mm-hmm. Favorite George rant. That's the one I really wanted to.
Yeah, let's hear favorite George rant.
So I have three. My favorite one. Well, anyway, the Chinese restaurant, the payphone is.
Yeah.
Him walking around the street in a puffy coat talking about double parked cars. That puffy coat alone, just the coat alone. And my favorite is when he goes to a funeral of a family member of a girl he's dating, and she has this brother who doesn't talk a lot. I don't remember the particulars, but he double dips a chip. It's not a George rant. That brother goes off on him, and it's one of my favorite moments of all time.
Yeah,
because I remember people telling me about that scene before I actually even saw the show. So like I watched the show, then looking for that scene, and it did not let me down. It is really funny. I love that.
Yeah,
the chip dip, man, it cracks me up every time.
I'm going to add a series of George rants as my favorite.
Yeah.
Like I have tons of favorite George rants, but one of my favorite, I don't know, it's one of my favorite episodes too, but it's the backwards episode. The whole episode happens in reverse.
Oh.
Do you remember that one?
I don't know. I don't remember that one.
They go to India for a wedding. Well, okay, so George has a couple. That episode is phenomenal all around. The whole thing happens in reverse. You take like 30-second to maybe up to like 3-minute segments, and then it's everything happening backwards. So you get the whole story backwards, but it works really, really well. And it's
interesting.
Funny. The couple things that happen with George is, number one, he takes this girl to India to someone's wedding for Sue Ellen Mishke's getting married to Pinter, and I can't believe I'm recalling all this right now, but
nice.
Elaine had dated Pinter, and now he's called Peter. Anyway, so George takes this woman with him who he's recently dating, but when he met her, he had Timberland boots on, so he can only wear Timberland boots because they make him a couple inches taller.
Oh, okay.
And he's afraid he's going to be too short, but then he's going to a wedding, so he paints his Timberland boots black. The second thing, though, is somebody at some point told him he can't go to the bathroom in India or he's going to get sick. So it's ridiculous, but the story is that he holds it the whole time they're in India. He never goes to the bathroom in India. And so he's just he's extra angry the whole episode because, and also he thinks that I think Jerry did sleep with this woman that he's taken, and all this different stuff, but that's a really good George.
Do they come
episode.
up with this stuff?
I know, it's crazy how it all fits together. All right, this is going to be nearly impossible. What's your favorite Kramer story?
Well, it's easy for me because I don't know that I don't have as many as you, but my absolute favorite Kramer story is when him and Newman are at the Mets game and Keith Hernandez spits on him.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but just the whole spit ricocheted off him and hit him in the eye, and I yell, "I'm hit." I don't know.
Yeah.
The whole thing gets me every time.
Yeah.
All his stories are so good, but that one is one that stuck with me for sure.
Yeah. So I could pick a million, but I think one of my favorites that pops to mind is when he's talking, he's coming back and telling everybody the story about when he's out golfing with the guy they end up finding out, I think, that the guy murdered someone later that day because he was so worked up from fighting with Kramer, but he had gone out golfing with somebody, and he says, they get in a fight about a golf rule, and just the way he describes the golf rule, he's got one of those like, no, sir. And like, you can't do that. But then he says, we almost came to blows. We were up in each other's face like a coach and an ump, like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he's just like scream. It's just one of my favorites. Okay. Everything Kramer does is
the hand
insanely
of the face,
good.
though.
What?
The hand of the face gets me.
Okay. Favorite Elaine boyfriend. Mine's easy because it's Putty. Is that your favorite?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, yeah.
Without a doubt.
Do you want to say any favorite episodes?
Just real quick, I had two that came to mind, and I wanted to just because. So it's the Chinese restaurant, waiting to get a table at the Chinese restaurant, and then there's an episode. I don't know why I didn't write down what season and episode these were, but they spend the whole episode in a parking garage.
Yep.
And I love the episodes where it's like the whole thing, and you keep waiting for him to get a table. Like they're going to get a table at some point, and the episode's going to we're going to transition from here to the table, and it never happens. Yeah. And I love those episodes where I'm waiting for the next thing, like for them to go to the next place, and they just don't. Then the episode ends. I don't know why. I think that is where the best comedy happens because it's almost like they're working without a net. There's no safety harness. It's literally all dialogue. That's all we have, to make this show, to make this episode work. And anyway, those ended up being my favorite episodes.
And somehow they're just able to hold the almost every single episode on its own. You just say, "Oh, remember the one where the one just popped in my head. Remember the one where Jerry and George have to go meet Elaine's dad, and Jerry has just gotten the leather jacket, and he has to,
he's got the lining in it.
Yeah, he's got the lining in it.
Flip it inside out.
Yeah, and then and at the end of the episode, Kramer ends up taking 3 of Jerry's pieces of clothing because he just keeps being like, "Oh, could I have that then if you're not going to use it?" Yeah. But Elaine's father is hilarious, and anyway, so every single episode has you just start digging in. It's joke after joke after joke, and it's just so good.
Yeah.
So we've kind of answered the rest, but is this the best sitcom of all time? I think we've said yes. So
I mean, it's definitely in the conversation. I think I've at some point talked about how there are different types of sitcoms. There are lots of different shows that I would still consider sitcoms. Comedies with heart, I've talked about a little bit, and those I would still consider sitcoms, like, the Wonder Years and the Full Houses and some of that stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
But as far as the, we're putting this in like the category with Parks and Rec and The Office, and like just the no overarching story, just kind of more of a sketch comedy show.
Yep.
Or a skit, something like that.
Yep.
I think this is probably the best of all time.
Yep.
In that category, it just doesn't seem to have ever been matched.
Okay, so then in that regard, just not to bury the lead, it's in my top 5
of all shows.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. And where is it for you? Since you don't like sitcoms, but this is the best one of them, how does that rank against regular TV shows to you?
I mean, I think
I don't need a number, by the way.
No, I know. It doesn't, like, all of my, I think I would bore people to death with my top 5. It's like, oh my gosh, it's a lot of like heavy stuff.
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely in the conversation. And I think as I watch it more, as I start to peel back the layers, it does things like knock The Office further down my list. It replaces things like that I used to love a lot. It replaces things like that for me.
Well, I think, for me, that's my thing is I think when people say they watch The Office all the time, I just think, why isn't Seinfeld the thing you're watching all the time, not The Office? Yeah, I just can't say enough. I can't overplay. Just like, man, go watch Seinfeld. If you haven't seen it, if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about, and you just need to go pick some up. And if you haven't seen it, I promise you will laugh so much. It's not even a question. All right, Brandon, what have you been watching lately?
So, first things first, I'm current on Mayor of Kingstown, Shrinking, Last of Us, Poker Face. Also, Mayor of Kingstown is not a good show, but I like Jeremy Renner. I've decided that's what it is. I like Jeremy Renner.
Yeah. And
that is about it. I don't think the story's that good. It hurts a little bit because I was rooting for it. Everything else has been great. Shrinking, Last of Us, Poker Face.
Oh yeah.
Awesome. The thing I'm the most excited about, and I have a Quicket coming out on it. It'll be a couple weeks ago when this airs, but coming out on the 21st of February. It's called Full Swing, and it's on Netflix. And it is a Drive to Survive type show about the PGA Tour. 2022.
Oh, wow.
PGA Tour. It is awesome.
I'm going to watch that almost immediately.
I'm actually shocked it's not on your radar already. Yeah. I saw it. I'm watching it, and I'm like, there's no way Anthony hasn't watched this already. It is so good. So I think there's like 6 or so episodes. And they follow a few different stories in each episode, like 2 stories in each episode, 2 players. And there's this whole like thread weaving through the whole series about, or the whole season about the players going to live golf, which is the, okay, you know about that.
Yeah.
So there's all that, which I knew nothing about that. And here's my thing about shows like this. So this is like Drive to Survive. This is like All or Nothing. You're getting the backstage pass on this. Shows like this, and I said this before, I really feel like are the best proselytizing tool for lesser known sports. And what I mean by that is sports that aren't football, basketball, and baseball in the United States. You know, things that people have like a loose recollection of, but aren't super familiar with. Because when I started this, I was like, yeah, I'll check this out. I don't really care about golf, and I definitely don't care about watching golf on television.
Yep.
By the end of the first episode, I cared about golf. I don't know how else to explain it.
Yeah.
I don't know. And Netflix has a way of finding the story, finding the narrative. They're good at this specific thing.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And it's a story. I'm like, even if you don't like golf, you care about underdog stories, you care about family, you care about love, like everyone cares about all this stuff. And it ends up being so like such a broad theme that it's like everyone would love to watch this.
Yep.
I don't know. I had all these really strong feelings about kind of the broader I don't even know what we're calling these, but like reality docuseries, but it's like they're sports related.
Yeah.
I think they're amazing. And I don't know. I would be calling up Netflix if I had, I was involved in a league, and it's just such a good tool. And it's really fantastic.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm not busting in on you just because I'm going to go watch this immediately. I'm pumped. I feel the same way as you do.
Yeah.
And so, yeah,
It's great.
I'm pumped about it. Let me so you're done, right?
Yep.
Okay. I'm going to hop on that and basically say, in that vein, I've got a couple bits of news about those sorts of shows. Pumped to watch that. Make or break. The show that I mentioned maybe a couple episodes about, it's about pro surfing.
Surfing, yeah.
Yeah, that season 2 of that just came out. So it's out now. If you hadn't hopped on it, now you have even more to look forward to because you have 2 seasons you can watch it rather than 1. It's funny that you and I had a small discussion about whether Kelly Slater was featured prominently in the show.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, yeah, not really. He's featured very prominently in the first episode of season 2. So that's pretty cool. And it was a little bit like Drive to Survive was, where Lewis Hamilton was not very prominent and then all of a sudden becomes more and more prominent.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure what happened with that, and it's not that Kelly Slater wasn't involved, but he is more now. At least I've only watched 1 episode because it just came out maybe today or yesterday.
What's that on?
It's on Apple TV Plus.
Cool.
Yeah. So that's, and then also, by the time this episode comes out, it's not out yet, but Drive to Survive, the new season of Drive to Survive will be out by the time this episode airs.
Do you know who won that season?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, this wouldn't be the first.
It would be the season that just happened.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I mean, like,
wait, do I know who won that? Max won again, right?
Max Verstappen won. Yeah.
Yeah. And then also, I think I was like, when I was looking that up today, like Daniel Ricciardo is not signed for next year, which is going to be interesting.
I saw that, but he was with Red Bull, like doing something, like he was at one of their pressers or one of their events. And
really?
Yeah, he's obviously not one of their drivers, but he was with them for some reason. And I don't know, like he's a free agent right now. Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, I'm sure there'll be some of that drama within this season of television that we just didn't get to see, but whatever.
Yep.
So those 2 things are coming back. To hit mine real quick, I'm up to date on Poker Face and Shrinking, and I just watched Slow Horses season 2, but we got an episode coming up about that. But just to throw it out there, season 2 was awesome and even, better than 1, I think. And then by the time, if you haven't heard yet, if you're living under a rock and you haven't heard yet, right a little bit after this episode airs, Ted Lasso will be coming back. It comes back March 15th, which is interesting. I should have looked this up before we talked about it, but that's a Wednesday.
Interesting. That is interesting.
The date that they have as the release date is a Wednesday, but it used to come out on Fridays, and normally Apple TV shows come out on Fridays. So I'm not sure if that's some sort of, I don't know. I don't know what's going on with that, but by the time this airs, that'll be coming up very fast. Finally, that was a whole lot of talking about stuff that was not a lot of new news, but I do have a new show that I checked out, which is Hello Tomorrow, which is also on Apple TV Plus. It's Billy Crudup, his new show. It's very interesting. Now, there's only 3 episodes. I've watched all 3 of I've watched all 3 of the episodes that are out now. I can't make a determination about like, is the show good or not? I just don't have enough information at this point. I will say I'm very intrigued. It's a little bit like Truman Show with also like a Glenn Ross. I know that doesn't make any sense to you, but
Glenn Ross was the stock traders, right? They were the
salesman. They were, the salesman movie.
Okay.
Always Be Selling.
Alec Baldwin. Okay.
Yeah. They may have been selling. I don't even remember what they were selling, to be honest, but they were selling something. It was anyway. So Billy Crudup is a traveling salesman, but what's very interesting, it's almost like a show set in the 1950s, except it's the 1950s. Like, I can't tell yet whether it's a resurgence of the 1950s or an alternate history, but it's a highly technological 1950s. It's almost like the 1950s if it happened again in 100 years. Everything about it is stylized like the 1950s.
Like
it has
Art Deco then maybe, right? Like almost like a...
I'm not sure if we're not supposed to notice that this is happening, or like, I don't know if it's like an artistic choice or if there's going to be a reason why it's like 50s, but it's like hover cars and robots help do everything, but everything is 50s. So it's hover cars from the 1950s and it's old school looking robots and they dress like 1950s. And then it's got a bit of without spoiling, I think that you find this out pretty early, but there's a little bit of a pyramid scheme type thing going on with the sales pitch. And also, I don't know, some of this might change over the course of the show, but it's very interesting. Obviously, I just love Billy Crudup. So anything he's in, but I couldn't tell you whether it's good or not yet. I will just say it has my interest peaked and I'm quite interested in it. Yeah.
All right.
And that's it.
All set? All right, ma'am.
Yeah. That does it for this episode of Good Show. Good Show is created, recorded, edited, and produced by Anthony Mako and Brandon Sharp. Our theme music was written and recorded by me, Anthony, and all our graphics and socials are developed by Brandon. If you've enjoyed your time with us, please make sure to like or follow us on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an episode. And if you appreciate our show, please throw us a rating and a review there too. If you'd like to discuss any of our content, you can search the Good Show Facebook group or follow us on Instagram at The Good Show Podcast. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.